"No, not today. I have a contract signing tomorrow. You know how much I fought for this deal," said the short, red-haired, middle-aged man into his golden iPhone. Roy Kinnear was the founder and owner of the city's largest transportation company. He had fleets of trucks all over the region. To expand and increase earnings, he tirelessly explored opportunities and made deals. However, the competing firms were also active, and sometimes he had to fight for large orders. Despite the challenges, he managed everything and personally knew every employee. Roy was known as a man of the people, a self-made person who went into debt to buy his first truck and started working in transportation. He escaped poverty at the age of 19, working 3 jobs to have a place to live and enough to eat. He obtained his driver's license while serving in the army. Like many others, he had a passion for big cars and trucks and the open road. Before leaving for the city, Roy had a major argument with his mother. She was the only family he had, being a late child and her beloved son. She had been overly protective of him, while he longed for freedom and independence. To make him stay, Eleanor resorted to deceit, pretending to be sick and claiming to have a weak heart. She begged him not to leave her alone. Roy turned down a lucrative job offer and spent a month taking care of his mother until the truth was revealed. Secrets have a way of coming out. "Yes, your mum is as healthy as an ox, and her heart is as strong as a young girl's. I was amazed myself," said the family doctor. And then Eleanor had no choice but to admit to lying, and because of this, a scandal broke out. "You don't understand what it's like for a mother to wait for her only son to return from the army. I have been yearning for a year without you, my little Roy, and on the 5th day after your return, you're already planning to leave for the city." "Yes, I am going to earn money to fix the roof, to buy you a coat. Mum, your salary barely covers your basic needs. We've lived in poverty all our lives. Don't you want a better life?" Roy was already motivated and had goals. He dreamed of becoming wealthy. "I just want us to be a family. I'm all alone. Your granny passed away a year ago. You left for the army and she was gone. You finally came back and now you're leaving again. How long do I have to wait? Couldn't you stay home for a couple of weeks?" "You know, opportunities like the one I had don't come every day, and I missed it because of your lies, Mum." The argument escalated. Roy left the next day. He would call his mother, but he kept the silence. He was afraid that she would try to lure him back to the village. Above all, Roy feared ending up like his classmates, who stayed in the countryside. They married the most fashionable girls in the village and settled for a simple life. Roy didn't want that fate. He dreamed of breaking free, of being the person who drove into the village in a big, brand-new red car, causing admiration and envy among those who knew him. And his dreams came true. For the first 2 years, he worked just to survive. He took out a loan to buy a truck, fulfilled orders, drove himself, and literally lived in the truck. He regularly called his mum, but he didn't visit often, only a couple of times a year, even for just a day. Later, when Roy rented a better apartment in the city, his mother also came to visit. This happened in the 3rd year, when he managed to secure really well-paid transportation orders. And the story continued. He paid off one loan and immediately took out another for a larger amount. He worked day and night to avoid going bankrupt. He understood 9 out of 10 newly opened firms go under in the first year. When he registered his business, he thought to himself, "I need to hold on for at least a year." At the same time, he enrolled in a business school. He was accepted on a budget because they believed he had prospects and a sharp mind. The teachers were delighted with Roy, and he took advantage of the opportunity to seek advice from them about his business. When the first year passed and the company did not go bankrupt, he breathed a sigh of relief. During his business school years, Roy met Amanda, his future wife. She had just started studying while he was already finishing his studies. Amanda turned out to be a promising match for him. She was the most popular girl in their class, and the daughter of businessman Jeff Hayes. Everyone knew him. Roy seemed to be a promising groom in his eyes, since he had started his own business and built it from scratch, so they quickly hit it off. Amanda was a beautiful blonde, slender and always dressed in the latest fashion. Both guys and girls were awed by her. Everyone wanted to be friends with her, but Amanda was different from Roy. He was always open-minded, never putting himself above others. He was friends with everyone, and everyone loved him not because he was a successful businessman and an excellent student, but because he was always willing to help and never left anyone in trouble. He would stand up even for the weak. Amanda grew up in a privileged environment. She was the kind of person who looked down on others. Roy didn't like this aspect of her personality, but being the beloved man of such a girl was flattering. He accepted her for who she was. Besides, Amanda wasn't just an arrogant rich girl. She had some good qualities too. She was caring, she compromised when she and Roy argued, and she was soft, gentle and sensual. She fell in love with him completely and was willing to do a lot for his sake. Roy proposed to Amanda and they got engaged. There was no wedding, even though Mr. Hayes insisted on it. At that time, Roy was facing problems with his business and he was hardly ever at home. But Amanda was happy to become his wife. She loved him. Every girl dreams of a lavish wedding, but due to circumstances, they had to wait at least 6 months, so decided not to wait. Amanda's mother left the family when her daughter was a child, and now she lived abroad with her husband's best friend, whom she fell in love with. Mr. Hayes made sure that his ex-wife was deprived of her parental rights, and Amanda grew up as a daddy's girl, forgetting that she once had a mother. Amanda was never able to finish business school. One of her father's friends offered Amanda to try taking part in the theatre, and she became fascinated with the idea of becoming an actress. She received praise from critics, and, despite her lack of formal education in acting, started performing in the local theatre, and often landed good roles. Amanda became a star, and everyone either hated her or envied her. She gave her all on stage, pouring out her emotions. But because of such intensive work, she would come home completely drained. Meanwhile, Roy often wanted to talk to her about his business, as they used to when Amanda was still a student, and they had just started dating. "Look, I don't understand any of this. You better tell me, would it be okay for me to do lip fillers? Would that be good for me? Our stage manager thinks it would suit me," she said. Roy only sighed, realizing that they had nothing in common at all. How did they even end up together? He was attracted to her looks and reputation, while she was drawn to the promising and popular guy from a modest background. Plus, Mr. Hayes adored Roy and encouraged their relationship. During conversations with his friends, Roy increasingly mentioned that he was unhappy in his marriage. "What's wrong with you? You have a gorgeous wife. What more do you need? Are you crazy?" his friends asked him when they rested together. "Love, understanding, and eventually children. Our marriage is just a formality. She's not the person I thought she was. I don't understand how I missed it, and what I should do now." His friends sighed. They were all deeply committed to their marriages, and while most of them complained about their wives too, divorce was never an option they considered. "Just have a child, and everything will work out. We have 3 kids, and they act as a band-aid for our troubled marriage. We would have divorced a long time ago if it weren't for them." But she doesn't want kids. She's fully focused on her career, her roles, and her figure. She has no desire for children at all. Well, make it seem like an accident. Once she experiences motherhood, she'll want a child. It's a built-in function in women. But she's taking birth control by the handful. No matter how hard I try, it doesn't work. We fight all the time when I talk about kids. She never even went to my mother's house. We've been married for 7 years, and they've never seen each other. Does she live far away? Yes, it's a bit far, but I go to see her once or twice a year if I can find the time. But Amanda never went. She talked to her on the phone a few times and that's it. It's like she's not interested in my life. Why does she even want me? Why did we get married? Roy's questions remained unanswered. Amanda, in turn, also liked to complain about her husband among her friends. They drank wine on Fridays in cafes. All of her friends were married ladies from the high society, which Amanda had been a part of since she was in diapers. Most of them didn't work, busy with themselves, the house, and the kids. "What about you and Roy? When are the babies?" asked her friend. "Children? No, I don't want to get fat. What kind of roles will I get if I get bloated?" "Don't you want to have kids at all?" the friends asked in surprise. "I don't know. I don't want to yet. Maybe after 30. And from whom to give birth? Roy thinks only about his work, and when we try to talk, we always quarrel. He thinks I'm too artificial, too fake, that I've got nothing but nonsense in my mind, and he's all about his work. I'm sick and tired of his inattention, honestly." At this time, Roy's mother was packing for the road. This year, Roy's anniversary, 30 years. She had long kept his late father's watch as a memory and now decided that she will give it to her son. But it was more of a pretext. She wanted to make things right with him. Her lies had made them strangers. There was an awkwardness that never went away, and she could do nothing about it. They had very little contact. Eleanor took Roy's favourite pickles with her. What does that city girl feed him? She hardly cooks a good meal for him herself. I'm sure she always orders food. Taking a large bag with her, Eleanor got on a bus that took people to the city once a week. Her heart was beating, anticipating the meeting. Would her son chase her away for her sudden visit? After all, a mother has a right to visit once in her life, especially since Roy had invited her, and more than once. But Eleanor always had no time for it, or it seemed to her a little awkward. Amanda hadn't said a couple of words to her during all this time, and it didn't look like she was very eager to get acquainted with her husband's village relative. Eleanor found herself as if cut off from her son and his family. She left all alone. She drove in a dusty bus along the bumpy path in the hope of establishing relations with Roy. She wanted to know why she still had no grandchildren. Or maybe Amanda was expecting a baby. She had no mother, and Eleanor wanted to be friends with her, to help her with advice. It was necessary to build bridges. When she arrived at her son's house, she gasped. A huge mansion in the good district of the city was her Roy's house. Wow! Who would have thought he'd be so rich? The courtyard was all tiled. There was a small fountain nearby, a gazebo next to it. She imagined her son and his wife talking there in the evenings, sharing their worries. But of course, she did not know that such a thing had never happened between them, except when they were students. But then there was no house. They were not so rich and so far apart. "Finally! Come in!" Amanda met Eleanor's threshold and rolled her eyes in indignation. Eleanor wondered what she expected, but how would Amanda know? "Hello," Eleanor smiled, welcoming, taking off her shoes. "Don't take your shoes off, but you are welcome to change. What's that bag you have with you? I've warned you, we have everything." Eleanor was confused. She was clearly being mistaken for someone else. "Daughter, Call me Amanda." Eleanor pulled out jars of pickles, set them on the table. "Good. Amanda, here, I brought some too. I made them myself. Where's Roy? Eleanor asked. My husband is not here now. Pickling. Thank you. But you shouldn't have. I'm on a diet. Do not eat such things. And Roy's never home. He's away on a business trip. Come on, let's go. I'll show you the front of the work. Slowly, Eleanor began to realize what was happening. Amanda showed her around the house and instructed her on what to clean and how to clean it. It became apparent that Eleanor was being treated as a maid. The woman was so confused that she didn't know what to say, but eventually decided to remain silent. Amanda showed Eleanor to a room where she could stay, and the woman decided to wait here for her son and then tell him everything. Eleanor found her daughter-in-law to be arrogant and condescending. It would be a good deed to put her in her place. The woman hoped that her behavior would make Amanda feel ashamed and maybe even apologize. How should I address you? Amanda asked. You can call me by my name, Eleanor, the woman replied. She expected her daughter-in-law to realize who she was talking to, but Amanda didn't even look at her. Did she even know her mother-in-law's name? After leaving her belongings in her new room, Eleanor started her work. Amanda immediately loaded her up with the full program. The kitchen was a mess, but it seemed like nothing more serious than scrambled eggs had ever been cooked there. Its burnt pieces stuck to a dirty skillet that someone had thrown on the table. The interior was classy, but everywhere was so dirty. Apparently, they had managed without a housekeeper before. Exhausted, Eleanor sat onto a small sofa in her bedroom. There was a small table, a single bed, and a small television hanging on the wall. Well, son, this is not the welcoming I expected, the tired woman thought as she drifted off to sleep. As she fell asleep, Eleanor asked herself, why did she do that? Why didn't she tell him she was Roy's mother? The only answer that came to mind was that Amanda looked like she would kick Eleanor out of the house if she confessed. Amanda was always busy, constantly talking on the phone. She was undeniably beautiful. It was no wonder that she was cast in the theatre. She looked like a doll, but inside she was as empty as a Barbie. The next day, Eleanor cleaned the house again, doing dirty and even hard work. But if you pretended to be a cleaner, do your job and don't complain. That was the woman's conviction. Toward evening, Eleanor asked Amanda when Roy would arrive. He's on a business trip as always. I'm not even sure he'll be back for his birthday. He doesn't even call me. How do I know when he'll be back? And why do you ask? Amanda was not embarrassed that the unfamiliar cleaning lady knew her husband's name. Their family was well known in the city, and judging by her air of importance, she assumed that everyone knew them. I'm just curious, Eleanor replied and returned to her duties. Eleanor continued to live with Amanda as a cleaning lady. On Sundays, she rested. Roy was supposed to be back any day now. Why has he been gone for so long? It's been almost a week. He didn't answer the phone or show up on his birthday. Eleanor began to worry. Meanwhile, Amanda didn't seem concerned at all. Hasn't your husband shown up yet? Eleanor asked, again a couple of days later. No, and to hell with him, to be honest. You know, I'm so tired of him. He doesn't give me any attention at all. Amanda started to complain. She was sitting on the couch in a bathrobe, having just gotten out of the shower. Her hair was wrapped in a towel. Eleanor continued dusting around her daughter-in-law, listening intently. You have no idea. You don't know this man yet, but let me tell you, he's the coldest man I know. I'm surrounded by admirers who crave my attention and love. I reject them all. I come home and he doesn't even notice me. Can you imagine my disappointment? All he talks about is the kids. He doesn't even think about my blossoming career. My father is getting older, and his business has declined in recent years. On top of that, he's sick now. I asked Roy to help with his business, but he refused. He says he has his own business, and can't manage 2 companies. And I can't do it either, and because of this, I even had an argument with my father. He had relied on Roy so much. But when you two met, Roy already had his own business, right? Eleanor asked, waiting for Amanda to inquire about her knowledge of their family. Yes, he had his own business. But running a transportation company takes up a lot of his time, and my father's business would allow him to make more money with minimal effort. I don't think Roy is the type of man who desires that kind of life. He has achieved everything on his own, and hard work is not a burden for him. Amanda sighed. Why did I marry him? The days were passing. Eleanor started to settle into her son's house, where pictures of him with Amanda adorned the walls. She eagerly awaited his arrival, but he was nowhere to be found. His phone was out of range. Where did your husband go, dear? Hasn't he called even once? Eleanor asked Amanda 2 weeks after her arrival in the city. God knows. I wish he hadn't shown up at all. Amanda waved her hand dismissively. Eleanor realized that her daughter-in-law was indifferent to her son's fate. Perhaps you should go to the police? He's missing. Something must have happened, said Eleanor with a maternal anxiety which she could not conceal. You know, you're right. If this had happened a few years ago, I would have sounded the alarm by now. But our relationship has deteriorated so much that I almost hate him. He doesn't even notice me, and I am his wife. When he's away, at least my nerves are calm. For some reason, Amanda felt she could confide her true feelings to a stranger. It's always easier to open up to someone unfamiliar. But Eleanor wasn't a stranger, therefore she decided to go to the police herself. At the police station, they looked at her as if she was crazy. The man is simply on a business trip. He has work all over the region, and if he has the kind of relationship with his wife that you say, it's no wonder he decided to stay away, said the officer. I won't leave until you accept my application, Eleanor firmly stated. The officer had no choice but to accept the paperwork, and 2 days later the doorbell rang in the mansion. Amanda greeted the policeman in the hallway. Is something wrong? She asked, surprised. Your mother-in-law, Eleanor Kinnear, has filed a missing persons report. She hasn't been able to reach Roy Kinnear for 2 weeks. Do you have any information about his whereabouts? Amanda assisted the officers in contacting Roy's office and claimed ignorance about his business. They left, but Amanda never realized that her housekeeper had filed the report. Another week passed, and Amanda's behavior became more unruly. Each day, she invited friends from the theatre to her home. They danced and drank, and Eleanor wondered how they managed to survive after consuming so much wine and still go to work. Amanda seemed to be celebrating her husband's disappearance. She didn't hide her happiness and openly told her friends that she had everything she needed, access to Roy's bank accounts. As for his love and care she hadn't seen all this from him in a long time. And then one man from her social circle had once stayed overnight at her place. Eleanor overheard that they had a wild night together. Her heart was in turmoil from this nightmare. She tried to keep quiet, hoping the police would make progress in the investigation. Unfortunately, the investigation had reached a dead end. Roy's car was found in the parking lot. He had bought a train ticket and boarded, but he never got off. Something had definitely happened, and the lack of progress only intensified Eleanor's concerns. Eleanor, would you mind letting George in today? He's coming this evening and I'll be waiting for him in the bedroom. I have a surprise for him. Amanda beamed, parading around the house in her underwear. How could you? Your husband is missing and you're doing this. Eleanor couldn't bear it any longer. I don't care. I wish he were dead. I would be better off without him. I've only realized it now. Don't worry about him. He probably found some simpleton with a huge ass who agreed to give birth to his brat. He doesn't need anything else. Idiot. I hope he's dead after all." Eleanor glared at Amanda and walked over to her, slapping her across the face. Amanda staggered back, holding her cheek in pain. "What are you talking about? That's it. That's enough. I came here to surprise my son, and you mistook me for a servant without even asking who I was. I'd clearly told you my name, but you don't understand. You have no brain. I was waiting for Roy, working for you, and you do this. You shameless." Amanda was shocked, looking at her mother-in-law. Now she could clearly see the resemblance between her husband and his mother. They had the same short, freckled face, snub nose, blue eyes, and smile. Roy took after his mother. "Why didn't you say so? Was I supposed to read your mind?" "Yes, I haven't told you, but I've found out so much. It might have been better not to know, perhaps. But now I know one thing for sure. You are not a couple. When he comes back, I'll tell him everything." Amanda flashed her eyes in anger. "And you know what, Eleanor? Get out. This is my house. Take your belongings and leave. I don't want to know you, and I don't want to know your son either." Amanda stormed into the kitchen and started throwing jars of pickles out of the window into the street. Eleanor was shocked by her daughter-in-law's behaviour, but what could she do? She packed her things and left. The sight of the broken jars made her cry. She hadn't seen her son, and she had learned so many terrible things. She had thought that her Roy was happy and had everything in life. She wandered down the street with her bag in front of her, unsure of where to go. Should she go to the train station? And what about Roy? Where was her own son now? Eleanor stopped, not knowing what to do. She looked up and saw a sign for a hotel. What if I asked to stay here? Maybe they'll give me a room. I could work here until they find Roy. Eleanor entered the hotel. The friendly man behind the counter immediately called the owner of the hotel, a middle-aged woman, accompanied by her chattering son. "Hello? You wanted to talk about work?" The beautiful thin brunette smiled. Eleanor smiled. "I'm looking for my son. He's missing. Roy Kinnear. Many people here know him." "Roy? Yes, I know him. I used to know him well. I'm surprised. I never expected to hear this about him after all these years. But do you really need a job? He's quite wealthy." Eleanor was upset by Amanda's behaviour and shared her story with that woman. She explained how she and her son were in a quarrel and how she refused to take money from him on principle. Eleanor felt ashamed. She never asked him for money, and she forbade him from offering it. That must have offended him as well. Eleanor also recounted the situation with her daughter-in-law and how everything unfolded. "I understand. I can offer you a job if you're interested. We need a maid, but it's hard work, I must warn you." "Honey, I grew up in the country. I can chop firewood and mend fences. I've been raising Roy alone since he was little." The innkeeper, Marisol, turned out to be a pleasant and talkative person. She explained that she inherited the hotel from her father after he died in an accident that took several lives off, including her husband Leonard. Marisol was orphaned overnight, and the accident was blamed on an influential man, a politician. Of course, everything was made out to be an accident, and in the blood of Leonard, who sat behind the wheel, found alcohol, to which, by the way, the man was allergic. He didn't drink at all. Marisol resigned herself to raising the boy alone, taking over the hotel and even doing some repairs herself. So Eleanor once again found herself in the role of a maid, living in an unfamiliar little room. "Oh my goodness, I was on my way to visit my son. It's awful how fate can turn everything around like this." A day later, Eleanor called the detective to see if there was any news. Unfortunately, there was none. I'll tell you honestly, there won't be any. This is the end of my powers. You seem to need a private investigator, Eleanor. The newspapers are already trumpeting that the famous businessman Roy Kinnear has gone missing. It's true. We've done everything we can. Now we can only wait. Maybe someone will see him or find him, or maybe he'll turn up. We've checked every hospital in the region, everywhere he could go. He's gone. The good news is, he's not in the morgues. He wasn't among the unidentified corpses either. Didn't match his age or ethnicity. Eleanor sighed and asked with a trembling voice, "Do you think that Roy is not alive?" The thought had crossed her mind, but she was not welcome there. Eleanor was not one of those mothers that first of all call morgues drawing terrible pictures. She was accustomed herself to thinking positively. I believe, based on my service experience, that this is possible. If a person is not found in the first few days, the more time passes, the harder it is to find them alive. Thank you, Detective. Just call me if you hear anything. I won't bother you any more. But you call me. I will, replied the investigator. That's all. What to do next? It's been over a month since Eleanor came to the city. Her cat left in the village has probably already forgotten what its mistress looked like, thanks to a neighbour who fed him. You're not in the mood today, Marisol said when she saw Eleanor after her conversation with the investigator. There's a reason for that, sweetheart. My son is no longer wanted, and I don't know what to do. He's missing. You know all about such grief yourself. Marisol listened to Eleanor, and after a minute of thinking she said, My friend got a job as a private investigator. I can ask him to help. The older woman's face lit up with hope, and she nodded in agreement. The older woman's face lit up with hope, and she nodded in agreement. Marisol's son Danny often played with Eleanor and became very attached to her. She loved children, but she never got her own grandchildren. That's why she loved to play with him all her free time. What else could she do? It was impossible to look for her son on foot. He wasn't lost in the city. Marisol was truly grateful to her for taking care of her child. Her mother had died a long time ago. She was only 2 years old, and she had grown up with her father in this very inn, had grown up here. This was her home, her family business, thriving for many decades now. In the evening when Danny was asleep, Marisol called her friend, with whom she had been friends since childhood. Duncan, you know I need your help. What's wrong? The man tensed up immediately, and Marisol told him everything like it was. By the way, this isn't the same Roy with whom you had an affair when you were young? Duncan asked, after listening to the whole story. Marisol blushed, thankful no one could see her at that moment. Yes, that's him, but his mother doesn't know anything. It was a long time ago. What's the point of remembering? All right, I'll help you. He's the sailor who drowned, isn't he? That's what you told your son, yes? Duncan asked. Danny thinks his father is Leonard, my dead husband. He doesn't know that I got acquainted with him when I had already given birth to him, so let it be that way. I just want to help, and that's all. Turns out Roy has a wonderful mum. Marisol smiled. Oh, really? Are you still in love with him? Duncan grinned. Marisol blushed again and didn't answer anything. She gave him all the materials on Roy's case that Eleanor had, and Duncan got the rest himself. The search began. He called every day to tell her what had come to light. She was embarrassed that he refused to take money for it. A week later, the first worthwhile news came from Duncan. I found a witness who told me what happened. On the day Roy was travelling on the train, there was a fight inside. A girl saw 2 grown-up slobs beating a man and then throwing him out of the carriage at full speed. She told her mother, but she didn't believe it or didn't care. It's the most obvious coincidence. So now all that's left is to search the area where it happened. Roy's phone is untraceable, unfortunately. I get it. I won't scare Eleanor yet. If there's anything concrete, we'll tell her then, Marisol decided. And you still haven't told her? Are you going to tell her at least? It seems to me that you are being unreasonable. Why do you still keep silent? And why have you been silent for so many years? Why should I? He's made his choice then. What will that change? It will change, for example, your son's life, your life, Roy's and his mother's. You can't keep this secret. It's not just about you. It would be okay if he gave up the baby, but he doesn't even know. He gave up on me, and holding a man back by a child is not my story. Don't you dare say anything to him when you find him. If you do... Marisol was afraid that one day Duncan would call her, inform her that Roy had been found dead, and there would be a line-up. But what to do if Roy is alive? Should I tell him about Danny? Since fate itself led his mother to her hotel. Marisol thought about it constantly, while Eleanor became more and more distraught. She had been gloomier than a cloud for the last days. I came here 41 days ago. If Roy died, it's been 40 days already, and he has no wake, no grave, no candles. What is this? What's this for? God took my husband and now my son. I can't bear it, she said bitterly. Faith and hope were leaving her. The waiting was getting harder every day. At last, the call they had been waiting for came. Found alive, Duncan stated succinctly. Lord, where is he? Marisol asked excitedly. He's in a small settlement, living with an elderly couple. He was thrown from the train, and he doesn't remember anything. The elderly man picked him up, picking mushrooms nearby. The dog found him. They took him in, took care of him, but Roy has no memory at all. You know, I haven't seen him myself or any pictures. No, this family doesn't even have cell phones. They live the old-fashioned way. We have to go. It may not be him, but he fits the description. The local police made a portrait of him and put it on a pole outside the station. That was the end of the search. Marisol told Eleanor the news, and she cried. Her son was alive! Alive! She began to pack. Duncan picked her up the same day and took her to the village in his car. When she came to the door, she saw her son, the same red-haired boy, walking towards her. Roy! My Roy, you're alive! She threw herself on his neck. Behind, smiling, stood a hunched elderly man and an elderly woman with grey curls. Roy, do you remember me? Eleanor asked, stroking his cheeks with her palms, as if he were 6. The man looked at her obviously. Mum, I seem to remember everything, only vaguely. Eleanor, Duncan and Roy drank tea for a long time in the house of kind hosts who had not abandoned the sick man in trouble. Where was he to go? We left him. He would be like our son now, only that one died in childhood. We lived in the city then. There was a gas explosion and that was it. We survived for some reason, but he didn't. We've been living here in the middle of nowhere ever since. Eleanor sympathized with the grief of the elderly couple. She told them about how she and Roy lived, how he had served in the army, and what he had become now. Roy's head ached, but thoughts rushed into his consciousness, making him worry. What about my company? I've neglected all my business. You should have asked. What about my wife? Eleanor snorted. And what about Amanda? Have you seen her? Asked Roy. Eleanor told her son the entire story from start to finish. He simply shook his head and said, I'm sorry, Mum, for everything. Please forgive me. I was foolish and young, and we were separated for so many years. I am to blame for that. I missed so many of your birthdays. Please forgive me everything. I was a fool. I don't need money or anything else. Just the people I care about. You're the only one I have. You're the only one who has been looking for me. What would have happened to me if it weren't for you? I'm sorry too, son. You're the only one I have. I'm sorry, my darling. Their reconciliation was heartfelt and lengthy. Even the private detective who sat in the corner on a wooden stool could hardly contain his emotions and tears as he heard the story. You promised her. Hold on and keep quiet. She'll tell him herself if she has to, he said to himself. As it started to get dark, Roy packed up, bid farewell to his saviours, and went to the hotel with his mother. You're not going home? His mother asked him. I'm going to get my things. Let everything stay with her. I'll only take what's mine. Her father's company is on the verge of bankruptcy. He's almost broke. Amanda will have to work hard to support a household like that. Are you going to divorce her? Eleanor asked. I will. It's about time. They drove for a long time and arrived almost at midnight. They were greeted at the door by a hotel employee. I'll introduce you to Marisol tomorrow. She's wonderful. If it weren't for her help, I'd be sitting in the village right now, grieving for you. I'll be sure to thank her. Come on, let's go to bed. It's getting late. That night they stayed in the small room where Eleanor had been living all this time. Roy was sleeping on the sofa next to his mother's bed. His legs didn't fit the sofa and it was stiff and uncomfortable, but he was happy. For the first time in a long time, he realized how much he had missed his mother all these years. Amanda had always discouraged him, saying that he shouldn't have to humiliate himself since his mother had done that to him. She was against visiting the village and always rolled her eyes, reproachfully, whenever Roy mentioned it. His wife believed it was time to forget his past life as a village boy and only look forward. And he was listening to her. Often his desire to call his mother was halted by a slight embarrassment that lingered in his heart after their argument. Perhaps he was afraid that if he went to see her, she would send him away. So he visited very rarely, and she was afraid to call him again, fearing that he would think she was trying to keep him close and control him once more. Thus they lived many years without each other, drowning in their own prejudices. In the morning, Roy woke up before his mother got up and went for a walk around the hotel. He needed to shower and return home. Oh, sorry. Roy's thoughts were interrupted as he accidentally bumped into a young woman at the corner of the narrow hotel corridor. She took a step back, brushed her dark curls away from her face and looked at Roy. He was struck as if lightning had hit him from within. The shock was so strong that it coursed through his entire being. He sighed intermittently, gazing at her. Marisol, you're Marisol, right? How did I not recognize you right away? She smiled and apologized. I wasn't intentionally seeking a meeting. It just happened. It seemed to her that it was indecent to search through a detective for another woman's husband, even if his wife did not care about him. In fact, she was embarrassed by her still lingering feelings for him, and she was also afraid that one day he would find out about their son and it would destroy his family. There were many doubts, thoughts and fears, and here he was, standing right in front of her. He hadn't changed much. In fact, neither had she. You know, there are no coincidences in life. I didn't expect to see you here. Well, actually, I thought about you. I even saw you once in the city. I was stuck in traffic, and you were walking on the sidewalk. I wanted to shout, but I realized it wouldn't be wise. Roy stopped, realizing he was talking nonsense. She smiled at him and said, "Let me make you some coffee, and we can talk if you like." Coffee, yes, I'm desperately craving coffee. Where I've been for the past few weeks, there was none of that, just herbal tea. They went into the kitchen together. Marisol told him how she met his mum, how they were looking for him, and he looked at her and couldn't take his eyes off her. "May I ask you something?" he inquired. "Yes, go ahead," she shrugged. "Why did you leave him? You didn't say anything, didn't explain. I had been waiting for you. I was alone for a long time after that." Marisol reminisced about the past, feeling as if it had all happened just yesterday. "I left? Wait, didn't you start going everywhere with Amanda?" Roy forgot about everything, his desire to take a shower, the problems at work and in his family. Marisol had entered his life so suddenly that she had completely stunned him. Emotionally, of course. Amanda was a friend to me. We never even met, even though there were rumours. But I was waiting for you. I thought you'd come back. You transferred to a distance learning program and just stopped coming. I have called you many times. The girls told me you were with her." "What girls?" Roy frowned. He and Marisol had met in the business school. He was a part-time student, but often attended business lectures. The school had an excellent faculty at the time, and there was much to be learned from them. Roy had noticed Marisol there, laughing with her friends. The girl was natural, simple and beautiful. It was nearly impossible not to fall in love with her at first sight. They got to know each other, and their friendship blossomed. They would walk together at night, sharing stories about their lives and plans for the future. Roy's nerves were always on edge when she was around. He wanted her to be his. Marisol was also in love with him, but admitting her feelings was like facing death. He would hold her hand, but never dared to embrace her. The tension between them was so palpable, and they both felt it. The day Roy decided to confess everything, he saw her with someone else. He arrived at their agreed-upon meeting spot and found her sweetly chatting with a fellow student. Roy felt consumed by jealousy and ended up going to a disco. It was there that Amanda found him quickly. He had just met her and was unaware that she had fallen for him like a cat. They spent the evening together and he walked her home. The next day, Marisol approached him. "You didn't come yesterday. Did something happen?" "No, nothing," he replied. She appeared confused and Roy looked just as lost. "By the way, I bumped into Ben yesterday. He saw me and spent half an hour asking if Helen had mentioned him. He's fallen in love and she's playing hard to get." Roy let out a sigh of relief because there was nothing between him and Amanda yesterday too. They had simply gotten caught up in conversation, and instead of jumping to conclusions, Roy needed to get to the bottom of the situation. Just then, Amanda approached them and kissed Roy on the cheek. "Last night was great. Thanks for walking me home. It's scary to be out alone at night," she said, intentionally aware that something was brewing between her and Marisol. Marisol turned pale. "Yes, you're right. It is scary to be alone at night. I was walking alone last night. Perhaps I should stop being alone," Marisol said, and turning away, walked off. Roy didn't say anything to Amanda, but immediately ran after Marisol. Amanda then pretended to have accidentally revealed too much and apologized. Roy took her words at face value, believing that she was genuinely sorry. After all, he had gone to the club of his own accord. No one had forced him to see Amanda off. Marisol didn't speak to him. In the evening, Roy met her with her friend and pulled her aside. He was afraid of losing her, afraid that she wouldn't look his way again. But her reaction confirmed that she had feelings for him. "I love you," he said, replacing a greeting. Marisol raised her eyebrows. "And I thought you loved Amanda." "No, I want to be with you." "Then why did you go to her? Why did you walk her home instead of coming to meet me?" "I waited for you like a fool. We had an agreement." "Why did you wait for me with Ben?" "He just happened to come over." A quarrel broke out on this ground again. Roy, still consumed by jealousy, behaved arrogantly. Marisol was also offended. In the end they quarrelled, and Roy imposed conditions that she should meet him on Saturday night. "If you don't come, I won't bother you any more," he said. Marisol intended to go, but she saw him with Amanda in the afternoon and changed her mind. Amanda and Roy were simply talking, seemingly in a purely friendly manner, like she and Ben. However, Marisol was jealous. Her emotions became tangled, and she had been crying at home all evening. Roy called her and tried to meet with her, but she had already been informed that he was dating Amanda. She had seen them together, and the rumours only confirmed her suspicion. Amanda was beautiful and promising. Marisol believed that Roy couldn't resist her. That's how foolishly they parted, loving each other and timid of each other, fearing rejection. She remembered that only night vividly. It happened when Roy and Amanda were already an official couple. It occurred at the birthday party of a mutual friend. Roy was drunk, and Marisol had also had an extra glass as part of a bet. They met and Roy couldn't resist. He kissed her and she kissed him back, and everything happened. Then he fell asleep, and Marisol quietly got up and left. Amanda saw her leaving the room. "He's mine, got it?" Amanda growled harshly. Marisol wasn't one for fighting, and was afraid of a scandal. After all, she was with someone else's boyfriend, although he was her beloved. "I just walked in and saw him there. It's not what you thought." Marisol made an honest face, ready to sink through the ground in shame. "I see. Sorry then," Amanda said, believing her. Marisol left, and from that moment on she avoided seeing Roy again at all costs. When she found out about her pregnancy, she left for another city to stay with her aunt. Roy graduated and married Amanda. On the day they married, Marisol gave birth to Roy's son, but he, of course, did not know about it. Pushing the memories away, Marisol looked at him. She was 28 years old now, but it seemed to Roy that nothing had changed, and she was still the same student, still at the business school. "You know, we should talk about this. Better late than never, right?" he asked. "And you won't even ask if I'm married?" She squinted her eyes. Roy was confused. It hadn't occurred to him that she could be a married woman. "No ring, though," he said with relief. Marisol shrugged her shoulders. "No." An awkward silence followed. "So, are you married or not?" he asked. "I'm a widow." Roy sighed. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Yeah, long story." At that moment, Danny burst into the dining room. He was sleepy, with red curly hair. "Good morning, Mum. I woke up and you were already gone. Can I watch cartoons?" he asked. Marisol nodded and he ran off. Roy, who was about to ask where the shower was and leave, changed his mind. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked. "And what are you thinking?" "This is my son, Danny. He's mine and my late husband's." She lied. Roy got up from the table and started pacing back and forth. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said finally, staring at her. "Is it that obvious?" Marisol lowered her head timidly. "Yes, more than obvious. He looks about 7 years old, if not older. He has my ears and my mother's eyes, and his hair is red." "Is that my son?" Roy asked. It was important for him to hear confirmation. "Yes. Forgive me. You were married and everything happened by chance between us." Roy laughed and cried. He hugged her and wouldn't let go, and Marisol didn't know how to react. "We'll talk about it, but right now I have to go. I have to file for divorce. But I'll be back tonight. You don't mind, do you? I'll stay here for now, get a room, if any is available," he said. "I don't mind. Sure, we have empty rooms and you can just take any of them," answered Marisol. Roy left. The meeting with his wife took place in their house. "Honey, you're back." Your mother must have told you everything, huh? Amanda asked. Roy nodded, and Amanda asked with squeezing her eyes, So what? You want a divorce? She didn't ask him where he'd been missing and what had happened to him. She didn't care. He realized it too late, but he had realized it. After all, better late than never. Yeah, I'll get my things and the rest later. He took the essentials and left the house. The same day, he restricted Amanda's access to all his accounts. He was greeted happily at the office, his co-workers hugging him, congratulating him on his return. They quickly organized a lunch and made him discuss everything that had happened. That's what it means when people care. Toward evening, Roy bought a huge teddy bear and came to the hotel. And where are you taking it? Asked Marisol. To my son. I have to make up for lost time. Do you ever think that Danny thinks his father is dead? Leonard raised him, and he remembers him. We carry flowers to his grave. How do I tell him now? I don't care how. Wouldn't it be better for the child if his father turned out to be alive? This is my son, and I'm not going to waste another second. At this moment, Eleanor joined their conversation. Who is your son? They had to tell me everything. The woman was over the moon. But the child must first be prepared for this. Marisol's right. You don't dump so much information on him at once. Just wait. Get to know him. Make friends. He's a wonderful boy. That night, Marisol realized that Roy would never leave her again. They talked again for several hours, telling each other about the past and what remained untold. From that day on, they had never really parted. Eleanor, despite the entreaties of her son and Marisol, returned to her village. She was not used to city life. Marisol and Roy stayed together. For the first 2 months they just talked, but Roy immediately made it clear that he would never let her go again. 6 months later they got married. The wedding was modest. It was attended only by close friends, as well as the same elderly couple who saved Roy. Of course, Eleanor was there too, and she and her son had become closer than ever. He called her at any time of the day or night, consulted her just to find out how things were going. And she felt like the happiest mother in the world. And when they finally plucked up the courage to tell Danny everything, he began to ask for every vacation to the village to his grandmother. 2 years later, a daughter was born to the Kinnears. 8 years passed. During that time, he'd never seen Amanda. He'd heard her father had died, heard that his firm had closed, and then one day he interviewed for a cleaning job in his new 2-story house, where the whole family had moved, not forgetting to bring his mother with them. She had agreed to finally move in with her son and grandchildren, and had sold her little house in the country. Good afternoon, said the applicant, and Roy was amazed to recognize Amanda in her. She had changed. She'd gotten a little duller. There were bags under her eyes, her clothes no longer looking amazing. She gained up. You? What are you doing here? Looking for a job. Imagine that, she said. Roy frowned. That's a twist. You used to be an actress, didn't you? They stopped giving me roles, and I haven't gotten an education, so I have to spin. You know, I'll talk to my friend. He also needs an au pair, but I won't invite you to work in my house, you know? Amanda nodded. Thanks. I'll wait for your call then. She walked out of the office with her head down, and a nice older woman came in after her, as it turned out, with excellent references.